Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in the last episode I got the wiring loom and the clutch conversion put in. In this episode I want to work on getting fuel to the engine. So these are the things that I've bought to be able to get the fuel to the engine. So let me just go through everything. I've got various hoses. I'm not too sure what sizes I will need, so I've got a couple different ones here. I've got more fuel line. This one is braided. So I've got 12mm and 8mm here. I think this is the main fuel lines that I'm going to be using. This one here is from the PD130 engine, and I think this is the one that goes to the fuel filter in the engine bay. And then over here I've got a Bosch fuel pump, and what I'll do, I'll put the details of that fuel pump in the description. And I've also got a fuel filter here, which I'm not too sure if I'm going to use that at the moment, and I'll explain that in a minute. Also, I've got some brackets that I want to use to hold the fuel pump and the fuel filter onto the body, and they were quite cheap. I got them from eBay for about £10 each. And then moving on up here, a fuel cooler. So speaking to a lot of guys that have already done the PD130 conversion, they recommend that you put a fuel cooler in. What that will do will cool down the diesel that comes back to the fuel tank from the return pipe and stop the tank from getting too warm. It's not really too bad if it gets warm, but I guess you don't want warm fuel going back to the engine, which will sort of reduce power, and I'm sure it's not that good. And then moving on, we got another fuel filter which will be mounted in the engine bay with a mounted bracket. So I'll show you where I'm going to put that later on in the episode. And over here I've got the original fuel lines which run underneath the Caddy. At the moment I'm not too sure about the fuel lines. I think I'm going to paint them silver just so they don't rust in the future. And then down here I've got some new rubbers to hold the fuel line in. So going over the fuel filter, I'll just explain a little bit of why I think I'm going to put it in. So looking at the photo, we got the fuel tank, we got the pre-filter, we have a fuel pump, another fuel filter, an engine, and the fuel cooler. So the diesel will go from the fuel tank to the pre-filter to the fuel pump, through another fuel filter to the engine, and then coming back from the engine return, it will go through the fuel cooler and then back to the tank. Okay, so now I've explained to you why I think the fuel filter might or might not work. What I'm going to do, I'm going to plumb it all up but not drill holes in the body for the fuel filter. So in case I need to remove it, or in the future if I do want to put it on there, I can just drill 2 holes and then screw it up. So I'm underneath the Caddy at the moment, and I've drilled 2 holes for the fuel pump to be mounted. At the moment they're a bit too small, so I need to drill them a bit bigger to be able to fit the nut sets into the holes, so I can then screw the bracket of the fuel pump into the 2 holes like that and keep that mounted there. And then what I'm thinking is I can mount the fuel filter here in the future. At the moment I'm not going to drill any holes for this, just in case I don't need to use it, because I've been reading online, some people use a pre-filter, which is this. So this will be attached to the fuel in from the tank over here, then on that side over there will go straight to the fuel pump. So it's sort of filtering out the fuel from the tank to the pump, just in case any large pieces of rust go directly into the inlet and then ruin the pump. But I'm afraid that maybe it might sort of bog down the fuel pump. And the second thing that I'm going to be mounting underneath is the fuel cooler, and I have drilled 2 holes which you can see over there. So this is how the fuel cooler is going to look, and again I need to drill the holes a little bit bigger on that side just so I can fit the nut sets in there and the outlets over here. I'll show you guys how I connect them all up as well once I have drilled the holes. And I'm not going to show it, but I'm going to paint the insides of the holes just to keep them from rusting in the future. So now I've got the fuel filter, the fuel pump and the fuel cooler all mounted up. The next step is putting the fuel lines in. So I've given them a coat of paint and also cut the ends just a little bit shorter than normal. And the next step is getting the fuel lines put in and then getting these rubbers so it holds the fuel lines in. So there's loads of these underneath, so I'm just going to get on with putting this in and then squeezing it all up. Once that is done, I can then put the rubber hoses in and connect everything up. So I've got the fuel filter mounted on the side over here, and I've made a little bracket to go on top, which needs chroming at the moment, but just for testing purposes is okay. And what I've done, I riv nutted 2 riv nuts at the top, sorry, nut sets at the top, so I can put 2 bolts through. And then on the bottom over here, just to keep the mount for the fuel filter straight, I mounted the nut set the other way and then bolted it straight through, which you can see over here. Doing this allowed the actual filter to stay straight and not sort of bent. And then I've got the fuel pipes in. If you look over here, they run all the way down and underneath. So looking underneath, they run all the way along. And I think I'm going to have to sort of touch up these sections here from when I was squeezing them down, but that should be fine. I can just get a little paintbrush and paint them in. And also I've just noticed underneath there's a whole line where when I loaded it onto the trailer it sort of scratched it, which means that the caddy was quite low. But I'm just going to touch that up as well with a little paintbrush and put some underseal on there and paint. The rest of it's looking all good, which is good news. I've got the fuel cooler mounted over here, and again I use the nut sets on both sides to mount it, and I've got enough clearance on the fuel tank. It looks like it's touching the fuel tank, but there's quite a big gap between it. At the top I've run some conduit line into the fuel pump, and then the wires inside of it just to keep it clean, and same for the fuel sender, which is at the top, just to keep the wires protected and waterproof. And then it runs into a grommet over here, and I've sort of squeezed both conduits into it so it doesn't let water inside. So yeah, the next steps is going to be connecting up these lines over here, the fuel lines, the fuel cooler lines, and also the fuel tank lines, which are here. So I've got the pipes and I'm just gonna get on with doing that now. On the fuel pump, the side that goes out to the fuel lines over here, there is a non-return spring valve inside there. So I could have changed that connection over there and put it to something that would just go sort of straight onto that. But what I want to do is keep the non-return just so fuel doesn't drip back from the line and then go back into the tank when the engine is off, which will stop it from starting easier. So what I've done, I looked online and they sell these over here, which is a banjo kit. So this will go on to the fuel pump like this, with obviously the washers, and then putting on the cap over here like that, which will keep this sturdy. Obviously I don't have the copper washers in, so it's a bit loose at the moment. And then connecting the fuel hose to that, and then to the fuel line over here. So I'm just going to get on with doing that line first and then move on to the next one. Unfortunately, while I was recording, the camera died, so I put some pictures in for you guys to have a look at the final result. So that's just one job ticked off on the Caddy. If you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of the content I post. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, where you'll see updates on the Caddy that I don't post on the YouTube channel. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching and see you on the next one.